This is my PvP Magicka Warden build, the Winterborn Cyromancer. The sets I use in this build are Winterborn, Clever Alchemist, Balorgh, a Trainee piece, and Malacath's band. The jewelry traits are Infused, Arcane, and Bloodthirsty. The enchantments on the jewelry, the Magicka infused jewelry is Magicka Recovery. The arcane jewelry is spell damage, and bloodthirsty jewelry is also spell damage. The pieces of armor should come in either sturdy or impenetrable. I have whatever I have. The enchantments on each piece of jewelry are Magicka enchantments. The front bar is Sharpened trait, that is to add to the penetration and total damage, including enchantments and other proc damage like Winterborn. The back bar is defensive to help prevent as much damage as possible. The food that this build uses is Orzaga Smoked Bear Haunch. This is for the big gain in health and in all 3 recovery stats, which will become more useful in the next update. The reason why I use Winterborn on the front bar is so that I can proc the damage and then switch over and use Clever Alchemist to add 651 spell and weapon damage to the build and have it carry over to the front bar. The reason why the Winterborn set is so effective is that it adds burst damage to the ability Force Pulse. When Force Pulse lands, it should trigger Winterborn, adding that AoE damage immediately, having it all spike at once. The abilities on the front bar are Bird of Prey, Deep Fissure, Fletcher Infection, Living Trellis, Force Pulse, and Northern Storm. Bird of Prey adds Minor Berserk, which currently for console players adds 8% damage. In the next update, it will only add 5% damage. I still find this to be worthwhile. On the back bar, I use Race Against Time, Defensive Stance, Arctic Wind, Bull Netch, Ice Fortress, and Spell Wall. I use Bull Netch over Betty Netch to add stamina to allow for better blocking, dodge roll, and CC break, as stamina recovery is incredibly important. Here I'll show you what the abilities do when buffed with the Bull Netch active. It doesn't add a ton of damage, however once Clever Alchemist is also added, it does do a significant more amount of damage on each ability. It is equivalent to that of a proc set, and that is why I like to use Clever Alchemist on the back bar. During the next update, that may become Eternal Vigor. That way the tri-set pots will add an incredibly amount of recovery in all 3 stats. Here is some gameplay footage of the Winterborn Cyromancer. I like to keep Deep Fissure up at all times, that way I can deal as much damage without having to think as possible. Northern Storm is a great ultimate, especially paired with the Balrog monster set. This adds a lot of penetration and spell damage to your abilities that make sure to kill your opponent. I prefer to use Arctic Wind on the back bar to prevent proccing Winterborn as much as possible, only when I want to specifically deal burst damage. It is a great healing ability, however, I like it better on the back bar. I prefer Living Trellis on the front bar. This adds a little bit of healing on the offensive without having to proc Winterborn when I don't want to. The front bar setups are set in a way to maximize the damage from the Winterborn set. Like I said before, Bird of Prey adds currently 8% damage. Then you have the animal passive that adds another 2% for each animal ability you have on the bar. Currently I would have 3, so that'd be a 6% additional damage, plus the 8% for 14% more damage. Then I use the Malacath ring for another 25% damage, and then you have the frost damage buff from the Warden passives for another 10% damage. equaling a total of 65% additional damage to the Winterborn proc damage. That is quite significant with burst damage, especially if you factor in the damage from Force Pulse when it hits, and hopefully when I add the enchantment, even more damage from the Frost Damage enchantment on the front bar. I hadn't played in a while, so as you can tell, I'm not currently activating Alchemist along with the Balorgh Monster Scent Ultimate for the best damage. But it usually does line up even if you don't want it to. Fletcher Infection also adds minor vulnerability to your opponent, increasing their damage taken by 8%. I am not sure whether or not that is reduced during the next update. I'm thinking that it is, but it'll be something that we'll have to check. Minor Brittle will be added in the next update. That is an additional critical damage percentage that your opponent will be taking when they're chilled, I believe. Because I'm using Malacath's Ring, that wouldn't play a factor in this build whatsoever. I don't like that targeting system there. I was aiming to finish off the opponent and I hit someone off to the left. Positioning in this game is off right now. Your opponent relation to you is not what you're seeing on your screen. That's why you tend to see corpses slide around after they died. It's because that's not really where they were when they died. The game's calculating their position on the server side when you're being shown what your, in my case, the console thinks is your position. Makes it very difficult for melee classes. That's why I prefer using a ranged Magicka build like this, as I was getting very frustrated while trying to make a Stamplar work in the melee range, as because I was getting hit by abilities I didn't believe were coming, and I wasn't hitting abilities I thought should have been hitting. This Warden is so much better of a class. You got the better burst healing, you have hard CCs, you can take a lot of damage and take on a lot of opponents once and keep going. Only problem is you don't have a Magicka Execute. Right there I got 3 assists. There would be no way to really finish off an opponent like Stamina classes have, or Magicka Sorcerer has in Mage's Wrath. However, this is good enough. They said in the update that one of the Destructive Line abilities will be gaining an Execute type element to it. However, I don't believe, from what I read, that anyone was really saying it was worthwhile to slot over any current ability, so I doubt that will change very much. Race Against Time is to ensure that snares and roots don't stop you. Mobility in a battleground is ultimate. It's key. Being able to run behind items and not allow your opponent to just sit there and smack you is very important. With this build, it's also very important to try and remember where you're using your potions. I messed up right there. You can see I used the potion on the front bar and didn't get advantage of using my Clever Alchemist. As I said, I've been running on my Stamina Templar for so long, I kind of forgot that I needed to activate Clever Alchemist all the time. It's a very forgiving build, as you can tell. I can take on quite a few opponents without dying as long as I have the ability to line of sight or los. Using your Northern Storm is very helpful. The major protection being 30% currently on console is huge. It does get reduced significantly in the update. It's something that really will make very little difference whatsoever. I believe it's reduced to 10% damage reduction, and at a cost of using an ultimate for 10% damage reduction isn't worthwhile. The ultimate itself is still great for dealing damage, however, and snaring your opponent, so I'll continue using it for that reason. As you can tell, when they dodge roll the Force Pulse, you don't see the Winterborn proc happen. That allows you to save the proc for when it's most important. My timing here is going to be a little off. I'm trying to get a deep fissure off when an opponent teleports right in, and as you can tell, it's a split second from a guess of right when that Nightblade comes through. I saved this fight in particular because it is a really good battle against a Nightblade one-on-one without any ally coming in and helping. As you can see, the Arctic Wind is the best ability for the Warden to use to get him out of stealth. And it also helps by hard CCing them and stunning them without you having to actually focus on stunning them. And with my build set up the way it is, you can focus on surviving and it'll automatically stun them and give you an opportunity to switch over on the offense, which happens right there. That's why I was able to get that kill. It's a very slow build. I don't activate the major expedition as much as I would like because the magic pool isn't totally high while using Orzaga's food. The massive Magicka pool isn't really necessary, especially when you're not using any wards or shields that scale to your max Magicka rather than your max health. Using HOTs and the defensive posture, you have no need for a huge Magicka pool unless you want to just add a little bit to your damage. This, I'd rather have the recovery way more than just the added tiny bit of damage. Health recovery is going to become even more valuable in an update as you get a 40% gain to your health recovery. A big reason why I'm considering switching over to Eternal Vigor. When you're low on health, it gives you 1,000 health regen, and then when you use a tripod, that's an additional 40%. So you're gaining 1,400 health regen just from that alone. And it's hard to turn that down. Another change during the update is Pierce Armor will give both the minor and the major penetration, so essentially giving you 9,000 penetration in one ability. I'm going to have to find room to slot that on the bar somewhere. It's just too valuable to give up that much penetration in one ability. We're just about finished with my video here. I really hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed bringing it and making it to you. I hope you learned something about the Magicka Warden class. It's a very good build. As you can see here, this is going to be a typical end for a battleground.